Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HTM here. Endless Archive for the Elder Scrolls Online is now officially live for PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. This new solo and duo content for ESO adds an exciting and challenging endless dungeon for players to conquer, which is also completely free for everyone to access. No DLC required, so of course, I want to give you my take on the best builds for it. This list will be primarily focused on solo playthroughs, but these ideas can easily be expanded to duos or solo with a companion if you want. Special thanks to Bethesda for sponsoring this video. And if you'd like to learn more about ESO's new Endless Archive, be sure to check out their link down below in the description or the pinned comment. So let's start with solo build number 5 on our list, which is the Magicka Nightblade Blood Mage build. Now, this build is all about survival and self-healing. Magicka Nightblades already excel in these two areas, and with the sets we've included here, those two variables go through the roof. You can literally stand in the red on this build without moving, and as long as your heals are cast, you simply will not die. This is also one of 2 builds on this list focusing on a heavy armor playstyle, proving that you can build for tankiness and still do extremely well in the archive, completely solo if you want to. Speaking of sets, like I said, we're going with a Blood Mage theme to this build, so everything I selected here provides some type of self-healing. Starting with the Bahara's Curse set on the body, this set places a rune on the ground that heals you for each enemy standing in it. And multiple enemies standing in the rune will even heal you multiple times, so keep this in mind as you're gathering enemies together within stages. This set also comes in light, medium, or heavy, though I actually do recommend heavy to boost your survival, as this build does not make use of damage shields, instead relying simply on mitigation and consistent healing to stay alive. Plus, heavy armor actually synergizes quite well with the Nightblade toolkit and actually extends the duration of our passive armor buff, so this setup works particularly well. For the second set, we're using Briarheart as either a front bar or back bar proc set for the extra damage, as well as some minor healing when we deal critical hits. And if you choose to go this route, you can easily run another arena weapon on the front bar or the back bar, something like a Maelstrom or a Willpower Staff if you want. And ideally, you'll want a precise Lightning Staff with an Absorb Magicka Glyph as your front bar weapon, with the back bar being an Infused Inferno Staff with a weapon and spell damage glyph. And finally, for our monster set, and fitting in with that Blood Mage theme, we've equipped Earthgore. Since this build relies primarily on heals over time, Earthgore fills in this gap nicely, giving us an on-demand burst heal whenever our health drops below 50%. Next up, let's talk skills. On the front bar, I would recommend Impale, Inner Light, Sap Essence, Concealed Weapon, and Merciless Resolve with the Soul Harvest skill as your ultimate. For the back bar, we have mostly dots and even more passive healing with Elemental Blockade, Twisting Path, Swallow Soul, Structured Entropy, and Siphoning attacks with Soul Tether as the ultimate. As you can see from the gameplay, I've tried to simplify things as much as possible, starting combat with our 2 back bar dots, then immediately casting our 2 heal over times, Swallow Soul and Entropy, on enemies as they spawn into the stage. Keeping up siphoning attacks ensures even more healing as you light attack in between your skills. On the front part, you should prioritize casting Concealed Weapon here early on to take advantage of its buff to your overall damage, and then use Sap Essence on groups and finish off enemies with low health using Impale. I also frequently swap out Inner Light on the front bar for other skills. For example, you might want to use Elemental Drain here, especially on the final Arc boss, Thoa Replicanum. But all in all, this is a fun and simple build that feels quite powerful and unique, and can easily be shifted into duo gameplay if you prefer. And for a full list of all sets and where to find them, including a mythic version of this build, make sure to check out the link for the written guide down in the description below. Build number 4 on our list is easier to play than the Nightblade and has even more AoE damage, and that is the Stamina Sorcerer Perfect Storm build. I try to keep this build as simple as possible, focusing mostly on crafted sets to form a base for damage, and also help improve some of the weak points of the Stam Sorc, particularly in the sustain department. But first, for the recommended sets, it's all about damage, and that is Order's Wrath. I've chosen to use this set as a front bar weapon, which counts for 2 pieces, since we're using a 2-handed maul, and then 3 medium armor pieces on the body to keep it simple. Make sure to use Divine's traits here and all stamina enchants as well. But like I said, the Stamina Sorcerer can struggle a bit in the sustain department, especially when using some of the more costly weapon skills like Carve and Stampede. Plus, I also wanted some extra sustain to run skills like Hardened Ward, which costs Magicka, but is also one of the strongest damage shields in the game and a great tool for surviving some of the more difficult fights and bosses in the Endless Archive. So to help with all of this, I've grabbed another crafted set here called Wretched Vitality. This set is perfect for this build in my opinion because it gives a ton of both stamina and Magicka recovery, and it's easily procced by using our main defensive skill, Hurricane, on the back bar. This also is going to open up the option for using a mythic and a monster set at the same time, which is very strong. Now for more experienced players, this setup might be a little bit over-sustained, so feel free to run a back bar damage set instead. Something like Pillar of Nirn or Aegis Caller will work nicely here as well. And to fit the Sorcerer theme, I've gone with Stormfist as the monster set. This one is great for damage, plus the bonus stamina recovery here actually does help a lot. And as I said, we also have room for a mythic on this build, which really takes things to the next level. My preferred mythic in this case is going to be the Ring of the Pale Order. Since we have so much AoE and damage over time, the heals are just going to keep rolling in non-stop. Now, the skills I've chosen here are pretty varied and have a fun hybrid feel to them. On the front bar, which is our two-hander, as I said, I recommend Crystal Fragments, Hardened Ward, Camouflage Hunter, Silver Shards, and Barb Trap, with Temporal Guard as our passive ultimate. Simply lay down your trap, then use Shards as a spammable to tear right through enemies, and just cast your shield as needed for defense, and then you can use Crystal Fragments basically as an alternative damage skill whenever this skill lights up for the bonus damage proc. Now on the back bar, we've got 3 powerful AoE dots you should be using all the time. That's Razor Caltrops, Carve, and Stampede. And then just our 2 main buffs on the setup, Critical Surge and Hurricane, with the Greater Storm Atronach as our main ultimate, typically reserved for boss battles. Speaking of bosses, you can also swap out Silver Shards, which is more of an AoE spammable skill, for Wrecking Blow if you know a boss is going to be a primarily single target fight, which many bosses in the Endless Archive are, for even more single target sustained damage if you prefer. So if you like a fast brawler playstyle with tons of AoE damage that shreds enemies on autopilot, then I definitely recommend you check out this Stamina Sorcerer build. Again, all the details including alternate skills, sets, passives, champion points, and more can be found in the written guide, linked down below. Build at number 3 on this list gets even easier because now we're breaking out into the 1-bar builds. And in this case, it's the 1-bar Stamina Arcanist build called Crux Cannon. The idea behind this build is to stack up 3 Crux as quickly as possible, and then blast everything in front of you with a fully empowered, pragmatic Fate Carver beam. We're also stacking critical chance and crit damage to get the most out of those damage ticks. And out of every build on this list, the Stamina Arcanist is what I would consider to be the most glass cannon style of build here because the damage is pretty insane. This build just melts enemies, and the rotation is also extremely simple due to the fact that it is just a 1-bar build. But just keep in mind that you will have slightly less defensive options, so you can die quickly here if you're not paying attention or you don't adapt to the situation. And we'll talk more about how to survive on this build when we get to the skills. But for sets, let's start by talking about the centerpiece of this build, which of course is the Oaken Soul Ring Mythic. Now I highly recommend you pick this up if you don't have it already, as it really simplifies things by giving you the most important buffs you need all in one place. We're talking about Major Resolve for armor, Major Brutality and Sorcery for damage, Major Savagery and Prophecy for crit chance, plus way too many more buffs to list here. Honestly, with as simple as the Arcanist class already, this mythic just makes a lot of sense, and it makes the whole build that much easier to play. So instead of worrying about buffs and rotation, you can just focus on the enemies in front of you. But to go along with Oaken Soul, I've included probably the best tradable damage set in the game for the Arcanist class, that being Deadly Strike. This is a medium armor set, so it works great with our stamina-focused build. And I'm just running 5 pieces of armor on the body, all divines with stamina enchants. Order's Wrath again is another simple and powerful set that boosts our crit damage and crit chance, making sure those beams do the most damage possible. I like saving the Order's Wrath set pieces for the weapons and jewelry here, plus 1 random piece on the body, really whatever you want. Since we want to use 2 daggers if possible, this could save you hundreds of thousands of gold, since you can just craft the daggers yourself or have someone craft it for you, rather than trying to buy Deadly Strike daggers on the guild traders. Finally, we have just 1 piece left over, so I tend to go with a 1-piece monster set like Slimecraw, either on the head or the shoulders to maximize our critical chance. Now for skills, honestly things do not get much simpler than this, except maybe our number 1 build on this list, which we'll get to in a minute. That build is insanely simple, but for the Stamina Arcanist, I definitely recommend Cephaliarch's Flail, Pragmatic Fate Carver, Evolving Rudement, Recuperative Treatise, and Impervious Rune Ward with the Languid Eye as your ultimate. Now remember, our goal is to get our Arcanist up to 3 stacks of Crux as fast as possible, making that beam attack do as much damage as possible. The Recuperative Treatise skill is a big part of that. This skill basically pops you up from 0 to 1 Crux instantly as soon as you spend all of your Crux on Fate Carver, so you're pretty much guaranteed to be at 1 Crux at all times. But then to get our other 2, you simply cast Flail 2 times as enemies approach. This skill is great not only for building Crux, but it also roots enemies in front of you, so it really helps to line all the enemies up for your beam attack. Plus, it also heals you, basically keeping your health bar topped off at all times, which is also very helpful. So after those 2 flails, simply cast your beam and then rinse and repeat. It's ridiculously easy. Now, in most cases, the shield from Fate Carver plus the heal from your flails is going to be enough to keep you at full health, but if you do run into trouble, that's where you have 2 very powerful defensive options as well. First is Rune Ward, one of the best damage shields in the game by far with a huge shield size. So I typically will cast this just as a boss is about to heavy attack me. You can block cast this as well to make sure that you don't get knocked down. Plus, if you have Crux stacked up already, the shield also heals you at the same time, which is great. In real emergencies though, if your shield is already up but your health is still low, that's where I would use the Rune Mend skill to get back to full health as soon as possible. Also remember, for damage, the Languid Eye skill is an AoE ultimate centered on a small area of the ground. So you need to be strategic with this one as far as where you cast it. But I also find that most boss fights in the Endless Archive are fairly stationary, so this is a very easy ultimate to use to burn those bosses quickly. But all in all, this is an amazing build for any solo content in the game, especially if you like simple skills and rotations. So give it a try and let me know what you think down in the comments below. But that moves us on to our last 2 solo builds for the Endless Archive, and next up is one of my all-time favorites. It's been my main character over many years in playing ESO, and that of course is the Magicka Templar. Now the Templar class in general is just made for the Endless Archive, so you pretty much can't go wrong here any way you build it. The Templars are known, for example, for great passive healing, especially with skills like Puncturing Sweep, which heals you and does damage at the same time, but they also have great AoE skills, things like Blazing Spear, a Solar Barrage, Ritual of Retribution, which are just going to shred through the trash packs that you find in all the stages of Endless Archive. Plus the Templar's style of sort of this stand your ground defense is going to be perfect for bosses. So yeah, it doesn't get much better than this, except for build number 1 on this list, which is even more powerful and even easier. But the build that we're talking about here at number 2 is called Nova Shield, and it's one of my original ESO solo builds way back when I started the channel, with a focus on stacking damage shields. In fact, every set that we have here on this build is going to give us a free shield, and you can get even more shields through Endless Archive Verses, which is pretty crazy. Now, our first shield set on this build is one of the best in the game, and that is the Hexos Ward set, which comes from the Deadlands DLC. Now, since this is an Overland set, it's also tradable, so it should be fairly easy to get, and you can see the tooltip on the shield here is massive and also increases with champion points. Now, I do prefer to run this as 3 jewelry pieces and 2 body pieces, and you'll want to transmute the jewelry to Bloodthirsty if you can, because the default trait here is Robust, which is not going to be ideal for a Magicka build. The next up is a little-known shield set from the base game called Prayer Shawl, and this actually has the fastest cooldown in the game for shields at just 2 seconds. This effect is going to be triggered by overhealing, which means healing yourself or an ally when they're already at full health. For soloing, this is going to be no problem since we already have at least 2 other shields active. Your health bar should basically be full all the time, giving you pretty much a permanent uptime on this effect. And finally, for the monster set here, I'm using the classic Ice Heart set, which gives you yet another free shield, plus extra critical chance and AoE damage. So it's the perfect set for Endless Archive. But that's basically it. Everything is either from the base game or you can buy it on Guild Traders. So it's very easy to get started with this build and no mythics are required. And for skills on the front bar, I recommend Toppling Charge, Radiant Ward, Elemental Drain, Puncturing Sweep, and Inner Light, with Shooting Star as the front bar ultimate. And on the back bar, Elemental Blockade, Ritual of Retribution, Solar Barrage, Channeled Focus, Channeled Acceleration, and Solar Disturbance as the back bar ultimate. And what I like about this particular setup is that all of your back bar dots are AoE and either ground-based or cast on yourself, which means you don't need a target, so you can buff and then cast all of your dots before enemies even spawn into a stage. Then all you need to do is just bar swap to your front bar, gap close into an enemy group using toppling charge for the stun and also an interrupt if the enemy happens to be casting. And from there, it's just puncturing sweeps all day long until everything is dead. And you probably noticed that we have Get Another Shield on the front bar with Radiant Ward, and I like this skill as well because it's almost like a Magicka version of Brawler from the two-handed skill line, perfect for emergencies or if you're getting surrounded by too many enemies. Just pop that Radiant Ward for even more shielding. And again, this build is essentially unkillable if played correctly, very easy to survive in the Endless Archive. But that brings us to the #1 solo build for the Archive, at least for this list, which is the Magicka Sorcerer. Now, there are many ways I know to play Mag Sorc in ESO, but my favorite by far is still the Oaken Sorc heavy attack build, where Lightning Staff heavies make up the majority of your damage, combined with some other AoEs. The sets, skills, and rotation are all extremely simple to get going, but I've also added an extra layer of survival here with my Infinity build, which pushes 8,000 plus health recovery into the mix, perfect for soloing in the Archive without casting a single heal. It literally does not get any easier than this, so let's dive right into it. But for sets, let's start with our main heavy attack focus set first, that being Sergeant's Mail. Now, this is a base game set that comes from the Wayrest Sewers dungeon, so it's pretty easy to pick up. I definitely recommend you get this one if you're like the heavy attack 1-bar playstyle. With this set, your heavy attacks stack bonus damage up to 4 times, but you can lose those stacks if you're not heavy attacking often enough. So creating this build without bar swapping, doing the 1-bar setup really makes the most sense in this case, and you can still weave in your normal skills between heavy attacks without losing the stacks, so it works out really well. Now you want the Sergeant's Mail Lightning Staff for this, which is going to count as 2 pieces since it is a 2-handed weapon, plus any random body piece of Sergeant's Mail, plus a ring and a necklace. And next up is a defensive set which synergizes very well with the Sorcerer's class passives focused on health recovery, and that is the Alessian Order set. Alessian increases your health recovery based on your total spell and physical resistance, so the more armor you have, the more health recovery you have, and since this is a heavy armor set to begin with, it's pretty easy to stack armor already, but we're going to supplement this further with our skills, our buffs, and our champion points to max this out at all times. Finally, you'll of course want the Oaken Soul Ring Mythic, which we already talked about, and a 1-piece monster set. I prefer to use a light Slime Craw piece here for the extra critical chance, but the skill setup is incredibly easy as well since the majority of our damage comes from those lightning heavy attacks. So the recommended skills here are going to be Summon Volatile Familiar, Mystic Orb, Hardened Ward, Unstable Wall of Elements, Bound Aegis, and then the Storm Atronach Ultimate. Now, much like the Templar build we saw last, all of our dots and AoEs do not require a target, so you can actually pre-cast all of these before enemies spawn into a stage, and then just spam that heavy attack button. Obviously, recast dots as they begin to expire, or if you need to use your Hardened Ward damage shield, and your massive health recovery on this build should just take care of the rest. As I said, if you'd like more information on this build or any of the builds on this list, links for our detailed written guides can be found in the description down below. If you found this video helpful or informative, all I ask is that you drop a like while you're down there, help this video spread on YouTube, and if you'd like to support the channel further, definitely check out our YouTube membership where our Tier 2 channel members, the Elite Squad, have access to even more video content, including a full solo walkthrough of the Endless Archive I just posted using the build that you're watching right now, the Infinity Magicka Sorcerer. So if that sounds good to you, just click on that join button down below for more information. Thanks once again to Bethesda for sponsoring this video, and thanks to all of you for watching. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.